Holy smokes, he's reading the Bible again. Matthew 14, John the Baptist beheaded. This is one of the crazy stories. There's a lot of wild stories in this book. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." That's like Scooby-Doo scary. Scooby-Dooby. What in the world? Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her, your brother's wife." Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people because they considered John a prophet. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guests and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." John's head on a platter. And, on a silver platter, that saying, you've heard that. There's so many Bible sayings that get passed along in our culture. And not everyone knows that some of these sayings are Bible sayings. I'll have your head on a platter. The king was distressed, but because of his oath and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted. And kings were brutal, ruthless, and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took the body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. And Jesus, I'm sure, mourned and was sad that this great prophet was lost. John the Baptist was great, and Jesus called him great. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing this, the crowds followed him on foot from the town. When Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd. He had compassion on them and healed their sick. So people come out, and he's like, all these people feel like they need me. And they do. And he healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late," because Jesus always needs the disciples' advice. So they're always ready to consult with him. "Send the crowds away, Jesus, so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Jesus, are you even paying attention?" "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000, beside women and children. I sometimes think about that as they were handing out bread. I can't imagine that they would pull, loaves out and be like, they'd pull some out and there'd be more in there. And I would be looking in the basket and saying, how is this happening? That would, I imagine the scenario, and it would be wild. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the water, on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear, "Ah!" And of course they did what, don't act like you're so brave and you wouldn't act freaked out. Yes, you would freak out. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come out to you on the water." Peter, he's awesome. Peter right away thinking, what would be the best thing to do if my master's walking on the water? To go out and walk with him. Peter has this childlike awesomeness. Come, he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me! Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith. He said, why did you doubt? And I think that was like a fun, loving little thing. I'm reading into it, of course. And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. So that was chapter 14. We're going to try and get through all 28 chapters of Matthew. We got another 14 to go. It's a long ways, but I'm going to plow through. Thanks for joining me, Facebook. See you guys later.